Our reading is from 1 John 4. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness on the day of judgment, because as He is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. We love because He loved us. He first loved us. Those who say, I love God, and hate their brothers or sisters are liars. For those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God, whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from Him is this: those who love God must love their brothers and sisters also.
The second reading is from the second chapter of James. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm, and eat your fill, and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what's the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I, by my works, will show you my faith.
When the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the angels with Him, then He will sit on the throne of His glory. All the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and He will put the sheep at His right hand and the goats at the left. Then the King will say to those at His right hand, come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer Him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you, a stranger, and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the King will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then He will say to those at His left hand, you that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you? Then He will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And then these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.
It's foolish to have faith without works, and I think part of what we're hearing is that this is evidenced all over the internet with the critiques of sort of the thoughts and prayers in response to more and more school shootings. And really, I think it's foolish to look at any version of a binary that fails to transcend and include. I think in some sense that's foolishness, and there's, the testimony is apparent. And I think that's because it's a question of integrity. The integrity of faith and action, spirituality and materiality. Any move to separate one from the other is the opposite direction of Jesus, the opposite direction of His understanding of God, of what we might call an incarnate spirituality, or this way of life, or unconditional love, the things that Jesus was about. To separate spirituality from action or materiality is headed in the opposite direction. It's also foolish to believe that we can love God directly by, quote unquote, faith alone. Now, I know to say that flies in the face of a tradition we call Protestantism, which is built on faith alone. But I think this is a part of what, as much as we've celebrated that, we actually don't really necessarily entirely believe it. And I think that's part of why we love stuff like Matthew 25. What we do for the least of these, for the poor, the naked, the sick, the hungry, the prisoner, you do those for God. You break it down a little bit more. What you do for people, you do for God. You break it down even more. What you do directly for people, indirectly for God, you do directly for God. Right? And so that's weird. It starts to seem like a paradox. What you do indirectly for God, you do directly for God. Side note, this is a parable about a beautiful, unconditional, perfect because it is an anonymous gift. Like we didn't even know we were doing this for the sick or the poor or the hungry. It's a pure gift. It's sort of given away. We didn't know that we were doing this for God. But it's sort of like we said last week. We talked about the message of the cross and how the message of the cross is foolishness. And we said with the message of the cross, people didn't know what to do with real love, and so they moved it back into the realm of sacrifice. It wasn't about love. It became about sacrifice in a religious system. Or people didn't know how to handle a pure gift, and so they made it a transaction. They put it back in the realm of economy. And in the same way with Matthew 25, we have this beautiful story of an unconditional gift, unconditional love. And then it almost seems like whoever finished the parable in Matthew 25 put it right back into the category of economy. Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for God. Oh, by the way, reward and punishment. Good and bad, right and wrong, black and white. And it's sort of right back into that realm of binaries. And this is the whole thing I think Jesus is trying to break people out of, is that way of viewing the world. And this, what it does, I think, is this presents what I will call a dialectic dilemma. It's like loving a person as if that is something totally different from loving God. And then finding out that it is by the former that you have accomplished the latter, right? So that your intent is to love God, and then I just loved a person, and then finding out that it was somehow by loving the person that you've loved God. Or like thoughts and prayers, for example. This is a dialectic dilemma where the intent of the first position, thoughts and prayers, is fulfilled by its perceived opposite, which is not thinking or praying for someone. So like loving naked people versus loving God, or thoughts and prayers versus action, or faith versus works. We sort of create these polarities. And the dialectic dilemma tears the veil of that black and white binary, and it says, no, loving God happens by loving people. And there is not such a thing as loving God apart from loving people. Thoughts and prayers only mean something when enacted. Thank God, in this case, as Maya said, by high school students marching and protesting and demanding to be heard by their government concerning gun regulation and safety. Or to say faith is only faith when it works. That otherwise it's dead. I think that's what James is getting at. There's this Muslim parable that supposedly came back from the Crusades. And the parable is really simple. It's about a woman who carries fire and water. And she carries fire in one hand with a torch, and she carries a jug of water in the other hand. And when she's asked about it, she says, I carry fire to consume heaven, and I carry water to extinguish hell, so that I will do the good only because it is the good. The fire is to consume heaven, the water is to extinguish hell, so that I do the good for no other reason, should be than, because it is the good. And again, this is not even a parable, maybe just like a short story, but it's meant to stoke this dialectic dilemma by creating this sort of tension of integrity in the most extreme way. The question being, what if we remove heaven and hell? What if we remove reward and punishment, and we make good its own reward, and we make the absence of good its own punishment? And again, it says the intention created by the first position to do good because of heaven or hell, the good is only really done by removing heaven or hell, by removing the economy, by removing the reward and punishment, thereby making it a true gift. So that's sort of the dialectic dilemma. Or we might say the intention created by the first, thoughts and prayers. Oh, jump the gun on that. The intention created by the phrase thoughts and prayers which I think we heard from the room. The original intent, really good stuff, to help, to heal, to comfort, to show up for people, to be supportive. The problem is when it becomes a pacifying, insulating statement that protects us from, or it can very often let us off the hook from the work that should follow thoughts and prayers. And then what we find is what is meant most meaningfully by offering thoughts and prayers is only really done when we set aside thoughts and prayers, or maybe when we transcend thoughts and prayers so that we can get about the work of help and healing and comforting and supporting. It's sort of, the dialectic dilemma is a call for sacred integrity. It's showing us that we've begun to split something that cannot be split, that we've disintegrated the sacred, our spirituality from our material practice. There's this philosopher called Feuerbach, who was an atheist, materialist, but he loved theology. He read theology religiously. He was thoroughly versed in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. And when asked about it, challenged about it, he says, I'm not hating on theology. I'm not criticizing theology. I love theology. Theology is my friend. And he goes on to say, the heart of the scriptures is real food and real water for real people. Real food and real water for real people. And this is so good. The truth of theology is anthropology, which must sensitize us to the infinite value of the other. I mean, this is 1 John, this is James, this is Matthew 25, right down the line. You want to know what it is to love God. You want to know what it is to participate in the sacred life. Look at your neighbor. Look at your action. Look at your material life. How do you spend your money? How do you vote? How do you treat people? It's not a belief in your head. It's not a warm feeling in your heart. Who are you in your material life? And so he loved theology, but he didn't believe in what we might call metaphysical reality, so spirits and the supernatural and any sort of divine intervention, because he believed so deeply in physical reality, the raw material of the human experience. So part of what we're saying is, if thoughts and prayers are intended to shape the invisible, right, and that's what a lot of you said, this is sort of the pop culture understanding of prayers. Thoughts and prayers are intended to shape the invisible, God, to love the visible, people, the world, materiality. And we hear this in prayers. God help us. God help them. God save them. God comfort them. God go to them. If our understanding of thoughts and prayers is we want to shape the invisible to love the visible, then we basically have a faith without works, right? We have a wishful thinking for God to act. God is invisible. God is somewhere else. And we want that invisible to love the visible, the people we can't see, the world we can't see. But if the intent of thoughts and prayers are to shape the visible to love the visible, the intent of thought and prayers is to shape the visible to love the visible. That's a whole different thing. Then we've got a faith that works. We have what we call formation, spiritual formation. We've got thoughts that become active. We've got prayers that put their boots on. We've got thoughts and prayers that do something and that mean something, because what they're doing is not seeking to shape an invisible reality that really we can spend a lot of time arguing about, but we really don't have any idea. What we're talking about is the shaping of the people we are and the way that shape takes shape in the world. And this is what 1 John says, right? How can we love God or ask God to love us or ask God to love our neighbors when we don't love our neighbors? How can we ask something invisible to love the visible if we who are visible don't love what's visible all around us? It doesn't make any sense. It is foolishness. We can't speak with that foolishness and claim that it's love. The invisible creates a foolishness in us when it pacifies us from the visible work of love, the work of faith. So, what does this look like in practice? That's where we always need to sort of bring it back, right? The school of love. Are we more loving? That's the question, right? Not do we believe the right things, not do we have the right theology, have we prayed the right prayer, or recited the right orthodoxy? Are we more loving? Are we more loving? So practice number one, thoughts and prayers. Write your thoughts. And I want to say this, stop only sending your thoughts to victims. And I don't want to knock praying, and I don't want to knock meditation, because we just did a really, really nice loving kindness meditation in which we're sending thoughts and sending energy and sending positive intent. Absolutely do that. But stop only sending your thoughts to victims and instead write them to power. I'm going to share, we shared last week the statement from the United Methodist Church, with whom we are affiliated, their statement on gun control. This came out in a social media post from our bishop, Ken Carter, who's the bishop of the state of Florida in the Methodist Church. He says, the critique of thoughts and prayers is the perception that thinking and praying can be an avoidance of the response God is actually calling us to make. He goes on. Again, it is there in Scripture, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. How do we love the students of Parkland and the ones who murdered them and the survivors around them? My thoughts and prayers in the present moment may be compromised if they're not integrated with a love that hopes and endures. Back to that integrity. In other words, what does it mean to love our neighbors? In the present moment, it goes beyond thoughts and prayers. It goes beyond thoughts and prayers. And then, I love this. This guy's dropping so much fire. I am seeking a nonpartisan movement that changes our laws, not one that repeals our constitutional amendments, a law that abolishes assault weapons, a law that protects our children and grandchildren, a law that makes it as difficult to purchase a gun as it is to buy an automobile or medication or rent an apartment. And so in the United Methodist Church, they've started a campaign this week called the 5,000 Letters Movement. This is a way of communicating with our congressional representatives, our governors, our president, that we hope for change. I can tell you that friends and pastors have written to me privately across a vast spectrum of politics and life experience to say that change is desperately needed. We have a goal of writing 5,000 letters to our political leaders. We write as United Methodists, we write in the name of Jesus, and not as members of political parties. We write because we've heard the voices of Parkland, we've heard the voices of Orlando, we've heard the voices of Newtown. We know that God loves this world. We love the world that God created, and we want our love to be more than a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Ken Carter, bringing the truth. So as we did last week, we are already participating in the 5,000 letters. I think we've already got a little over 40 that we had little postcards for last week. I know we dropped some at the Tri-C, and they're writing some the Cross Cultural Center at Stetson. And I thought that Caitlin was going to have more. Are there more back there? Anywhere? Yeah, so there's some on the bar. If you didn't get to, or if you want to write another one, the goal is 5,000 in the state of Florida. After this last week, I think they're going to dwarf that like in the next day or two. I think there's going to be a lot more than 5,000 letters. But if you want to be a part of that, write your thoughts. I think it's easy to get on social media and go, thoughts and prayers. If you've got thoughts, write them down. Don't just send them to victims. Like, send your thoughts to victims. Absolutely. Send them the love. Send them the comfort. You are not alone. But also write your thoughts to power, because that is how, as Maya put it, that's how change happens. Practice number 2, hide your prayers. I love that this came up organically in the conversation. Stop only saying your prayers to God and instead live them with God. And this is that stuff that Jesus says about, right? Don't pray in public like the pagans do, but go hide in your closet, and God who sees in secret will know your heart, and all that stuff. So the point is, don't put your piety on display. The measure of your personal holiness cannot be captured in a hashtag. Do something about it. And that's hard, because we live in a culture where it seems that Facebook is crying out for our thoughts, right? And I can't even remember, what's the current question now on Facebook, right? What are you thinking? What's on your mind? Anytime you log on, that's what it's asking you. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us your thoughts. What do you there's been another crisis. What are you praying for? It's this incessant question. And I wonder if we can redeem thoughts and prayers by hiding them. And I don't just mean hiding them passively. I'm not just saying hide them from social media. I'm not saying keep praying, but just don't post about it. I'm not saying don't go pray in public, like just literally pray in your closet and don't tell anyone about it. That's fine. I think more actively hiding them in our lives, hiding them in plain sight, hiding them in our material reality, or what we would say around here, hiding them in our practice. How can we hide our prayers in the way that we live? How can we hide our prayers in the way that we serve people around us and care for people around us? To Rob and Jen's point, we talked last week about for people who do believe in a metaphysical reality and that somehow praying for help from God gives them hope. It helps them to endure. Absolutely. We're not saying don't pray. We're not saying don't exercise this contemplative hope and this form of practice. We're saying don't allow this to relieve you of the burden. And I think that's very often what we're naming. When we say there's a problem with thoughts and prayers, it's that it relieves us of a burden, but rather thoughts and prayers ought to be gasoline on the fire of that burden. Our thoughts and prayers ought to ignite whatever it is that we feel like we have to do in the world. They should shape us to see the opportunities we have to do work all around us. This is why I think maybe around here recently in the last year and a half or so, we've become more fond of the phrase contemplation and contemplative practice than we are of the phrase prayers, because prayers are so culturally loaded as a passive thing, right? Fold my hands, dear God, help the victims, because I can't do anything. And so I'm just going to wish that something happens. And alternatively, the sense that we're getting about contemplation is that it invites us to engage in a process that forms us, or it forms our way of seeing the world into a template, right? Contemplation with a template. It shapes in us a filter for seeing and acting. So yes, absolutely pray. Absolutely meditate. Absolutely focus your thoughts and pray your prayers, but do it as a way of shaping the way you see the world. Do it as a way of shaping your invitation to act in the world around you. There's this Buddhist parable about a woman who receives this call to translate and distribute the sacred scriptures of her people, because at the time it's only the priests and the religious leaders that have them. And they were the only ones that could read the text. It was not accessible to the masses. And so this woman sets out, she hears this call from God. She has no money, and she sets out and starts to raise money. And 6 or 7 years in, she's almost to the point where she's got enough money to hire the translators, and she's going to lease the printing press. And she's been begging on the street. She's making little trinkets and wares, and she sells them. She's hardly eating anything, so she can store away all this money. And 6, 7 years in, she almost has the money together, and there's a plague in this neighboring city. And without thinking, she immediately goes and she spends all the money on medicine for the sick, on bringing nurses and doctors, on funding the different clinics that are helping the people in this plague. And it's only after the plague has passed, years later, she spent all this money. She's been serving herself in these dirt floor clinics. Only after all this does she go back to her original calling, starting from scratch, to raise the money, to translate the sacred text and distribute the scriptures. And another 10 years go by. Now she's aging and she's become ill, and she's almost got enough to fulfill this calling, to hire the translators, get the press. And now a famine strikes in her own city. And immediately, again, without thinking, she spends all of this money bringing provisions to the city, looking after the destitute, especially looking after those who have lost their families. They don't have anyone to care for them. And finally, again, she's out of money. And she begins again. Another 10 years later, she's on her deathbed, and she's finally raised enough. She finally hires a translator. She finally leases the printing press, and she gets to see, right before she dies, she gets to see the scriptures translated. She gets to see them distributed, put in the hands of the people so they can read them for themselves. But after she dies, the people begin to say that she had actually distributed and translated the scriptures 3 times, and it was the first 2 that were the most beautiful and the most wondrous. Faith without works is dead. Thank you, Heather. I saw you look at your watch. And I think with that, I'm done. No. Thoughts and prayers without action are a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal, loving an invisible God without caring for your visible neighbors. However we want to phrase this, they're all saying the same thing. It's foolishness. It's foolishness. It is not love. It is not love. The last practice, I'm going to skip through some of these for the sake of time. So the last practice, this is going to seem like an oddly simple one. Pray. Seriously, try it. So I was at a required Methodist retreat this week for candidates for ordained ministry, and they pray before everything. I feel like they pray after everything, and it's just like it's almost a transition. Like somebody's done talking, we're not really like there's a second before we do something else. Like let's pray about it, which is fine. That's it's cool. So we get done with the morning session, and we're about to start lunch. And I'm like, oh, would somebody pray? And so like Debbie goes up, and she's going to pray at the front. And my buddy Jose is sitting at the front of the room, and he goes, hold on. And He says, Debbie, my son is at Gateway High School in Kissimmee, and there's an active shooter there now, and he's texting me in his class that like they're on lockdown and they're not really sure what's going on. They've heard something, but they're not really sure if it's shots fired. And then he just stops, right? And so Debbie's been invited to pray for lunch. And Jose has just said, there's this active shooter situation in which my son is in it, and he's texting me now. And the implication is could you pray for that? Like if you're going to do lunch, also maybe let's ask God if God could be, a part of intervening in this active shooter situation. The point is, there are times, right? I'm on the third story of the United Methodist Conference Center in Lakeland, which is 2 hours away from Gateway High School in Kissimmee. Like, there are points at which you are powerless to do anything. We can't do anything from there at that time. Like, writing to the gun lobby from the third floor while an active shooter situation is going on is not helping that situation in the moment. There are times at which you are helpless. And in those times, I think it's okay to pray. I think the difference is, what do we pray? Right? Because Debbie still said a prayer. And when you're helpless, when all there is left to do is pray, what is it that we pray? And Debbie didn't say anything about lunch, so she sort of failed that because the lunch may not have been blessed. But all she said was this. She stood up at the front of the room and she said, God, help us to know what to do. God, help us to know what to do. That's a contemplative prayer. That's not saying, God, we're not going to get involved and change the gun lobby. God, we're not going to be involved in, it's not passing responsibility. It's saying, in this moment, I am helpless. Can you help shape me to know what is mine to do? And I think for me, this last year has been living a lot in the Serenity Prayer, right? It's praying for a filter for surrender and for action and for wisdom. God, help me to accept the things that I can't change, right? So if I'm on the third floor of a conference center and there's an active shooter situation going on, in that moment, I cannot change that. Help me to know and to have the courage to change the things I can. I can write letters. I can speak to people who can make a difference. I can reach out to people who I know are victims of this, and I can actually come to their aid. And help me to have the wisdom to know the difference. What is mine that I can control, what is not? Where can I actively be involved with my faith? Where can I not? And then finally, and I think this is what we experience, I hope, every week at the table, that the Eucharist is not about coming to be satisfied. And I think when we think in terms of thoughts and prayers, and a lot of what people said in the conversation, is that very often this is actually about the person who's saying it more than it is about anything to do with anyone else. It's not about coming to be satisfied by the bread of faith, but being empowered with bread for the journey to do the work. It's not about me being satisfied, it's about me being empowered to do the work. It's not, you come to the table and thank you, God, I got what I needed, right? I'm here for this divine product and I got the product I needed, so now I'm satisfied. But instead, we come to the table to be reminded that we know that we've got what the world needs. And when we come to the table and we face the table, it's always followed by turning around. And we face the world knowing that we have what the world needs and faced with this one question. What is it? I know that I have something the world needs. What is it? How can I give it? Where can I contribute that? And it's not just thoughts and prayers. We come to the table not to celebrate Jesus' transactional death, but instead enacting Jesus' unconditional life of this contemplative engagement, of this spiritual activism. And so when he says, remember, it's not a passive invitation to have faith in me, right? Believe in the idea of me. But remember, as in put members back on the body of this universal Christ, to put flesh on the spirit of the things Jesus was about. This is what we mean when we talk about the body of Christ. It's not a bunch of people with faith in beliefs, right? Hashtag thoughts and prayers. But a bunch of faithful people who practice a form of life, which I think is a faithfulness to whatever it means for each of us to discover every moment of every day, how to bring whatever our thoughts and prayers are into material reality, into material Christianity at its best. Body and blood. not to celebrate magic bread or a special cup, but coming to be reminded every week that we've been called to give our lives, bodies to be given, blood to be shed. That what we have to give are bodies, not just thoughts and prayers, not disembodied thoughts and prayers, but embodied thoughts and prayers, embodied. Not my singular body, but this body, this group of people who are and can and ought to shape one another and can, in doing so, shape the world. And so the table of this working faith, of these lived thoughts and prayers, of making visible the love of the invisible, of the integrity of the unconditional life of love, this table is set for us tonight. As always, it is set for us and open to all people, and no one will ever be turned away. When you're ready, feel free to come and grab a piece of bread and dip it in the cup.